Hello everyone. Welcome to the first series of Minddrive. Quick question before we start. In the last 7 days, how many of you dealt with a difficult person? A boss who made you feel 2 inches tall? A colleague who sucked all the energy out of the room? A family member who turned a simple conversation into a battlefield? A friend who couldn't make a single decision without dragging you into the chaos? Every single hand should be up right now. Because here's the truth that nobody teaches you in school, in college, or in any job training you've ever sat through. You will spend the majority of your life dealing with people. Not spreadsheets, not strategies, not systems. People. And yet not one class, not one lesson, not one framework for how to actually do it well. 80% of the stress in your life right now does not come from your workload. It does not come from your finances. It does not come from your circumstances. It comes from people. And the reason most people struggle with difficult people isn't because they're weak or socially awkward or not smart enough. It's because they're using the same approach on every single person they meet. And that is the mistake. There are 4 types of people you will encounter in every workplace, every home, every relationship, every room you ever walk into. And each type needs a completely different approach. Use the wrong approach on the wrong type, and the conversation falls apart every single time. Use the right one, and you become the person everyone wants in the room when things get difficult. By the end of this video, you will have a system, not advice, a system for handling any person in any situation. And we're saving the most important rule of all for the very end, so stay with me. Let's get into it. Type 1. The emotional person. You know exactly who this is. This is the person who feels everything loudly. When they're happy, the whole room knows it. When they're upset, the whole room knows that too. They take things personally. They read between lines that don't exist. A slightly short email becomes a sign that you're angry with them. A missed lunch becomes proof that nobody likes them. They are not being dramatic on purpose. This is genuinely how they experience the world. Their emotions arrive before their logic does, every single time. And the mistake most people make with emotional people is trying to logic them out of what they're feeling. Don't do that. The moment you say calm down or you're overreacting or that's not what happened, you have lost them completely. Because now they're not just upset about the original thing. Now they're upset that you won't acknowledge how upset they are. You've doubled the problem. Let me tell you about a situation I once had to navigate at work. I had a team member, talented, hardworking, genuinely one of the best people on the floor, who came to me one morning absolutely furious at her manager. Not mildly frustrated, furious. Her hands were shaking. She was convinced the manager had deliberately undermined her in front of the whole team. My first instinct was to go straight to the facts. Find out what actually happened. Figure out who was right. But I stopped myself. Because the facts were not what she needed right then. What she needed was to feel heard. So I sat down with her. I didn't defend the manager. I didn't dispute her version of events. I just listened. Fully. And I said, "That sounds incredibly frustrating. I can understand why you felt that way." Something shifted in that moment. Her shoulders dropped. Her breathing slowed. Then and only then I brought the manager in. I created space for both of them to speak. And what we discovered was a simple misunderstanding that had spiraled entirely because nobody had stopped to acknowledge the emotion first. The whole thing resolved in under 30 minutes. Not because I had all the answers. Because I had the right approach. Here is the one-line rule for the emotional person. Feel first. Fix second. Acknowledge what they're feeling before you try to solve anything. You cannot reason with someone whose emotional brain is running the show. Calm the emotion. Then bring in the logic. Stay calm. That is your job when you're in the room with an emotional person. Not to match their energy. Not to shut it down. To be the steady presence that gives them permission to come back to themselves. Type 2. The dominant person. This one is different, and in some ways more complicated. The dominant person is not necessarily angry or emotional. They are confident, decisive, strong-willed. They walk into rooms like they own them, because in their mind, they do. They have opinions about everything and they share them whether you asked or not. In a workplace, this is often your most senior person in the room. The VP who runs every meeting like a military briefing. The manager who has decided before you've opened your mouth. The colleague who somehow always ends up directing the group, even when they have no official authority to do so. And the mistake most people make with dominant people is pushing back directly. Don't do that either. When you challenge a dominant person head-on, especially in front of others, you trigger something in them that has nothing to do with the actual issue. It becomes about authority, about who is in control. And now instead of a conversation, you have a standoff. I once reported to a senior leader who had zero patience for being challenged. He was sharp, experienced, and he knew it. In every meeting, every review, every conversation, he needed to feel like the most informed person in the room. Early on, I made the mistake of presenting my ideas directly. Here is what I think we should do. Here is why. He would shut it down before I finished the sentence. It took me a while to figure out what was actually happening. He didn't need my ideas. He needed to feel in control of the direction. So I changed my approach completely. Instead of presenting my view, I started asking his first. What's your take on this? How would you approach it? I'd let him lay out his thinking, give him the room to lead. Then once he felt in control of the conversation, I'd introduce my perspective as an addition to his, not a replacement for it. That's a strong direction. One thing I'd add to that is, suddenly my ideas were landing. Not because they were better than before, because I stopped threatening his sense of authority to get them across. Here is the one-line rule for the dominant person. Give them the wheel. Then quietly help steer. Let them feel in control. Give them choices rather than directives. Ask their opinion before sharing yours. And when you do share yours, frame it as building on their thinking, not replacing it. Dominant people are not obstacles. They are engines. Learn how to direct the engine, and you become indispensable. If you've already spotted someone in your life in those first two types, good. That's exactly what this is designed to do. The next two types are the ones that cause the most invisible damage. Not because they're aggressive or loud, but because most people misread them completely and never figure out why the relationship keeps breaking down. Stay with me. Type 3. The confused person. And this one surprises people because on the surface, the confused person doesn't seem difficult at all. They're not aggressive. They're not emotional. They're usually hardworking, well-meaning, and genuinely trying, but they are paralyzed by options, by decisions, by the fear of making the wrong call. Ask them a simple question, and you'll get a 15-minute conversation that ends with, "I'm not sure. What do you think?" Give them a choice between two things, and they'll find a way to need a third option. Ask them to make a call, and they'll ask 3 other people what they think before they can commit to anything. Working with a confused person without the right approach is exhausting, because you're constantly doing their deciding for them, and they're constantly coming back for more. I worked with someone once. Let's call him Mike. Incredibly hardworking. One of the most diligent people I've managed. But every time a decision had to be made, even a small one, he would freeze. He'd send 3 emails asking for clarification on something that was already clear. He'd delay actions that needed to happen that day because he wasn't sure if it was the right move. It was costing the team time, and it was costing him confidence. The mistake most people make with the confused person is making the decision for them. It feels helpful. It is not helpful. Every time you make the decision for a confused person, you confirm their belief that they can't do it themselves. You become their crutch, and they become more dependent, not less. What Mike needed wasn't answers. He needed a structure. So I gave him one rule. Whenever you're stuck, write it down. 2 columns. Option A, Option B. 3 pros and 3 cons for each. Set a timer for 2 minutes. When the timer goes off, decide. The first time he did it, he laughed at how simple it felt once it was on paper. The second time he did it without being reminded. Within a few weeks, he was making calls on his own that he would previously have escalated 3 times. He didn't need a smarter person. He needed a clearer process. Here is the one-line rule for the confused person. Don't give them answers. Give them a structure to find their own. Clarity is the gift. Not the solution, but the framework that helps them reach the solution themselves. When you do that consistently, you don't just help them in the moment. You build their confidence permanently. Type 4. The practical person. And this is the type that trips up even the most socially intelligent people in the room. The practical person is not cold. They are not rude. They are not disinterested in you as a human being. They are simply ruthlessly focused on what works. They have no patience for small talk that goes nowhere. No interest in feelings that aren't attached to a clear next step. No time for ideas that aren't backed by evidence. If you walk into a conversation with a practical person and lead with enthusiasm instead of data, you will lose them in the first 60 seconds and spend the rest of the conversation trying to get them back. I once reported directly to a VP who was the purest version of this type I have ever encountered. Brilliant, efficient, completely allergic to anything that felt like filler. In my first month, I made every mistake possible with him. I'd walk into his office excited about an idea. He'd ask 2 questions. I wouldn't have the answers. Meeting over, I'd send him a long email explaining my thinking. He'd reply with 1 line. What's the recommendation? I'd try to build rapport with some small talk before getting to the point. He'd look at his watch. It took me 6 months to understand what he actually needed from me. Not excitement, not relationship, not even creativity, evidence. The day I walked into his office with a 1-page summary problem, clearly stated, at the top, data in the middle, recommendation, at the bottom, he leaned forward. For the first time in any conversation we'd had. Now we're talking, he said. From that point on, our working relationship changed entirely. Not because I became a different person, because I learned to communicate in his language instead of mine. Here is the 1-line rule for the practical person. Lead with facts. Follow with everything else. Skip the preamble. Get to the point. Have your data ready. State your recommendation clearly, and trust that if they want more from you, they will ask. Practical people respect efficiency above almost everything else. Give them that, and you earn their trust faster than any amount of relationship building ever could. So now you have the system. 4 types. 4 approaches. The emotional person. Feel first. Fix second. The dominant person. Give them the wheel. Quietly help steer. The confused person. Don't give answers. Give structure. The practical person. Lead with facts. Follow with everything else. But here is the thing that sits underneath all 4 of these. The thing that makes every single one of these approaches work. People don't respond to your words. They respond to how you make them feel. Read that again. It doesn't matter how smart your argument is. It doesn't matter how right you are. It doesn't matter how carefully you chose your words. If the other person doesn't feel heard, respected, or understood, nothing you say will land the way you intend it to. Every approach in this video works because it starts from that truth. The emotional person needs to feel heard before they can think clearly. The dominant person needs to feel respected before they'll consider your input. The confused person needs to feel capable before they can act. The practical person needs to feel their time is being respected before they'll give you theirs. The skill of handling people isn't about manipulation. It isn't about tactics. It's about paying attention to what the person in front of you actually needs and being flexible enough to give them that instead of whatever you were planning to give them. That is the whole skill. Right there. Which of the 4 types do you deal with the most right now? Let us know in the comments and tell us which one you find the hardest to handle. That conversation down there is always worth reading. Now, before you go, the hidden bonus I promised at the start. The single most important thing to do at the beginning of any difficult conversation, before you say a single word. Ask yourself 1 question. What does this person need from me right now? Not what do I need to tell them? Not what do I want from this conversation? Not what's the fastest way to get this resolved? What do they need? Because the moment you start there, everything else becomes easier. You'll know which type you're dealing with. You'll know which approach to use. And you'll walk out of more conversations feeling in control than you ever have before. That's a wrap for episode 1 of Survival Skills for Real Life, here on Minddrive. Next week, episode 2. Why most people communicate wrong without even knowing it, and the 3 rules that fix everything. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, Remember, clarity creates confidence. Confusion creates conflict. You're in the driver's seat. Start acting like it.